Okay, so let's get started with making some art using coding. Now, this is a new file, and the first thing you see is you've got the setup function and you've got the draw function. So what do these mean? Well, if you imagine you're making a painting, the setup is where you're setting up the painting, so you're assembling your canvas, you've got your materials, you've got your paintbrushes, you've got your paints, and then drawing is the act of drawing. So these are two functions, one of which assembles all the materials and one of which is used for the creation. And to paint, you need a canvas. In fact, we have a canvas here. It says create canvas. We have set up our canvas and it's 400 pixels by 400 pixels, which is here. And as you can see on the screen, it's 400 pixels wide and 400 pixels deep. And the only really important thing you need to know is that in computer coding, we draw from the top left-hand corner. So it goes from 0 to 400 on the x-axis and 0 to 400 on the y. So 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and then all the way down to 400 here. Now, I'm going to move this background from draw into the setup area. And that's because I'm going to want to draw on top of it and I don't want it to refresh. We don't need to get into that right now. Let's just get started with some drawing. So I'm going to draw an ellipse. This is a posh word for a circle. And where do I want it to go? Well, I want it to go to where my mouse is. So I'm going to give it an X position of the mouse, mouse X. So wherever the mouse goes left to right, that's where it's going to go. And then I'm going to do mouse Y. And here's the radius, well, diameter actually, 40. Let's see what happens. Okay. Wow, so we're creating something using code. We are drawing over the screen, creating a circle. And this is, a good place to start, but it's not really like actual drawing, is it? Because the first thing you can do with drawing, unlike say an Etch-a-Sketch, is that you can actually put your pencil down and then lift it back up and put it in another place. It's the same thing with a computer. You can click your mouse to select something, but you don't want to always select it. You want to let it go eventually. And what do? You release the mouse. So we need to write into our code something which says, if the mouse is pressed, I want to draw a circle. And if it's not pressed, then I don't. Well, how do we do that? Well, it's very simple. We're going to write something called an if clause. We say if, open brackets, mouse is pressed, watch the spelling, and I put that in regular brackets. If the mouse is pressed, then what? Well, in coding, things that happen inside these curly brackets. You put one at the start and one at the end. So now I'm saying if the mouse is pressed, and only if the mouse is pressed, we're going to draw this circle. So let's see what happens. Nothing right now. And there we go. We're actually drawing on the canvas, lift up, unclick. There we go. We're drawing all over the canvas, and this is nice. And this isn't the only thing we can do. We could take out the fill. So say no fill, and just got the wireframe. Or we could say no stroke and take out the edging and draw in a kind of slightly childish, fun painting manner. We can change the size. So let's take a look at that. Excuse me. Make it smaller. We could make it larger. So that's the diameter. But let's add some color. Now, normally color works with something called RGB, which is the balance of red, green, and blue. But I prefer a system called HSB. I'm going to type in color mode, HSB. So what does HSB mean? Well, you've got a circle of color. I'm sure you've seen this before when you're selecting your color palette and it goes red, yellow, green, blue, orange, so on, and it gets back to red. So it's a 360-degree circle of color. And saturation and brightness stand for how much color there is and how bright it is. Those are both measured out of 100, but the first one is measured out of 360, going from 0 all the way around. And so typically a color will look something like this, 360, 100, 100. Let's see what that looks like, shall we? So let's plug that into our fill. So we'll say fill, like the paint bucket tool. There we go. What color is this? It's bright red. Here's the interesting thing actually. If we make this 0, it's bright red as well. Let's try some different numbers. Let's plug in some different numbers. 120. Okay, that's pretty good. So that's a green. Let's try 240. Ooh, 2,400. 240. There we go. We've got blue. It's interesting, isn't it? We got red is 0, green 120, blue 240. So they're kind of separated by 120 each time. We can also play around with saturation. Because there's no saturation, it's 0. And this is another cool, interesting thing we can do. We could do that, then change the color and make it green. But the problem is each time you do it, it refreshes the screen again. And we don't really want that. We want to be able to change colors automatically and maybe even automate it so the colors are kind of rolling from one thing into another to create this kind of psychedelic background. So I'm going to show you how to do that in a second, and we're going to do it by using our first variables.